Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be looking at how we can reduce the experience of pain in fibromyalgia, but we're going to be doing that through the lens of a performance coach. I am not a medical doctor, so we're not going to be looking at any of the medical treatments for fibromyalgia, but what we're going to be doing is looking at how we can create a movement experience that will reduce the experience of pain. We have the best job in the world because we can focus each day on creating a movement experience that makes someone feel awesome. We can put movements together, create games that help someone discover just how amazing their body is, discover what makes them feel strong, what makes them feel powerful. But if they're experiencing chronic pain, fatigue, haven't slept for weeks, it can be far more challenging. And we know that our clients are going to judge that session on how we make them feel, not only in the time, but 2 days later. So we certainly want to make sure that we're not doing too much too soon and they wake up and get a flare up of fibromyalgia. So what I want to look at is how we can make sure that we're meeting our client where they are and make sure that we're creating the right experience for them. Now, if we go back to how we learnt to move, we learnt through gameplay. And that gameplay might have been as simple as being called to a loved one learning how to walk, or it might be playing tag in the park. But in order to do that, a whole series of events had to go off. First of all, you had to have a compelling reason to move. And with a game, it was normally an opportunity to get close to a loved one, have fun. But to be able to do that, you needed to make sure that you had the motor skills, the coordination to be able to make sure that you had the right muscle firing at the right time in the right sequence with the right amount of power output. Because if you didn't, you would wobble or you might fall over. But that's not a big deal because when you're a kid, when you wobble and fall over, you just jump back up again and your body adapts and learns and you improve those motor skills. And then you probably put these new motor skills that you've learned into a more challenging environment. You might start to do them faster, or you might to repeat those movements again and again and again. So you start to move towards performance training where you're adding more intensity and more load. But the art of a good game is something that connects with what you like to do. So is it something that like pickleball, or is it tennis, or is it playing tag stuck in the mud? And you might have some really fond memories of learning games and developing those movement skills when you were younger. But what gets harder is as we get older, movement tends to get a bit more serious and we tend to repeat the same movement again and again, whether that's a squat or a lunge, and it becomes much more official. And we tend to have a coaching style that's wrapped around it, that's more intrinsic, based on our biomechanics. Knees in line with toes, shoulders pulled back and down. Make sure you're in neutral spine. But there's none of that when you're in the playground. No, you're just running around trying to get to the other person. And if you're experiencing pain, it can be a bit of a minefield. What is the right exercise to do? How much of that exercise should you do? How much load should you add? How much speed? How much intensity? How much volume? And if we go down to Instagram, we will get a whole multitude of mixed messages and myths. So I hope that we can start to unpack some of these myths. These were some of the things that came up repeatedly. Do yoga and don't do yoga. Make sure you're stretching, but don't stretch too far. Do cardiovascular exercise, but make sure you're not getting your heart rate up too high. Do resistance training, but make sure you don't fatigue each muscle. Make sure that you're taking it easy, but don't lie in bed. Well, good luck with all of those. We've pretty much got the opposite end of the scales for every single one. And this mixed information can add to the experience of anxiety. And some of these words are so catastrophic in the fitness industry. And there's a lot of robust literature out there that says that if we're hearing words, catastrophic words, from people that we trust, like doctors, like personal trainers, like group exercise instructors or parents, words that create fear, these words themselves can be a direct causation of pain. And not even posture is a causation of pain. It's a correlation, but not a causation. Yet a lot of robust research will suggest that the impact of catastrophic words, fear-inducing words, can in fact be a causation of pain. So I would suggest that it's not just thinking about what would be the right exercise to put in your game and what would be the right intensity and load, but also to think about how we coach this. Now, I was brought up with coaching cues like knees in line with toes, shoulders pulled back and down, tight, weak, and dysfunctional, looking to create a perfect muscular balance with our client. But I would say that perhaps it would be more beneficial to our client's experience if we get rid of tight, weak, and dysfunctional and start to use things like you're good in a short range, you're good in a long range. So everything is going to be signposting that the client can be successful, that they're strong, that they're awesome, building self-efficacy and reducing fear. So the biggest thing we want our clients to feel is safe, listened to, and have an experience that they enjoy, so they'll come back. Because basically, there is no one deadlift that has ever.
Talk to me to give me that high five. Nice, and give me a cheer. Cream. Blue.
Our aim should be creating an image, an experience that somebody wants to come back for. In the middle there, that was Damaris, and she first started experiencing symptoms from fibromyalgia just after she had a fall 3 years ago. Hina at the side with the big boxing gloves, she first started experiencing it over 10 years ago. And when I first met her, she struggled to walk and she was incredibly fearful around moving. She'd also had an experience where she worked with a personal trainer and they basically tried to push her into movements too fast, too soon, and that really put her off going to train with anyone or doing any form of exercise class. And then we have Dawn, who is a faster trainer expert, and she uses the faster process that I'm going to be looking at today that's helped me to help my clients, and she uses that with her clients as well as with herself too. So the big starting point is, what is it that makes you want to move? What are the things that you think are an opportunity? And now to some of us, that's a piece of cake. Yum, yum, yum. Lovely. Some people move away because there's a spider. They don't want to be near the spider. But what we want to focus on is those opportunity moments, those sparks of joy. And maybe you're talking to your client and you mention golf and you see the eyebrow lift, or you mention tennis, pickleball, hockey. But we've got to make sure that yes, I saw my client's body language change there. And then we need to dig into that. We need to find out, what was it about this particular game that emotionally connected with our client? It could be just having that freedom of moving around the court, or it could be that feeling of, when we move, it actually helps release those endogenous opioids, which helps reduce the sensation of pain in itself. We also get all those wonderful dopamine hormones. We feel great. Could be that. Or maybe it comes from working as part of a team, the community aspect to it. Or just maybe You're highly competitive, but we need to know which it is. Where are you getting that dopamine, that excitement from? The competition, the ability to move around, or the community, because that will change the exercise, the game that we need to create for you as the client. Now, at the moment, about 2 to 4% of people, that's 320 million people, are experiencing fibromyalgia. But what is really interesting to me is that 80 to 90% of those people are actually women. And we don't know the reason for this. It's not clear. There's some mixed information. There could be a correlation with the climacteric period. As we increase inflammation, that could have a correlation to it. But as I say, the research on that isn't clear at the moment. But what is clear is there is no one test to diagnose it. There's no scan, no blood test. And the problem with this is it can leave many people feeling gaslit, making them feel like they've not been heard or someone doesn't believe them. And the last thing we want to do is kind of say, oh, it's in your head. It is not in your head. It is something very real. But with no single diagnosis, what they actually do is just rule out other possibilities. So they might rule out rheumatoid arthritis, which can be tested with biomarkers. But unfortunately, fibromyalgia, there are no biomarkers that we can test. But it does not mean that it's not real. You absolutely do feel a multitude of different symptoms: brain fog, anxiety, unpredictable pain, flare-ups. And what I hope is that this talk can give you some tools to help share with your clients to help manage those flare-ups. I would love to say, do these 5 exercises or eat these 5 pieces of food to balance your hormones. But that's wrong. And it also makes someone feel that they need to search for this fix. And actually, it's more about how we can come to terms with having the tools to navigate these flare-ups of pain. And sadly, there is no silver bullet. I can't find any specific exercise that you should or should not be doing. But what I can find repeatedly is don't overdo it. Listen to your body. Don't do too much too soon, but reintroduce movements regularly. But I think one thing that we need to do is to have a look at pain and see if we can explain it as best as possible. So I've taken an example from the British Pain Society, and this is something that I share with a lot of my clients. It's a really useful website, and thanks to Faster Health and Fitness for introducing me to this website. So pain can be perceived as a warning of potential damage. But here's the kicker: it can also be present when there is no actual harm being done to the body. So you can have pain when there is damage, but you can have pain when there is no damage being done whatsoever. Normally, pain is the good guy. It's actually telling us, oh, you might want to watch out here, and it's not great if you don't have any pain at all. But what happens with fibromyalgia is we're constantly being bombarded with this experience of pain, even though there is no actual tissue damage. But it does not mean that it's not real. It certainly is. Pain is an emotion experienced in the brain. Well, this I don't agree with. And I think that it's more a whole body experience. Constantly, we're giving, our body is giving us information of the temperature that's around us, any noises, any pressure on our skin. And this nociception, this information can be present without pain. But what happens is when this information becomes important enough and it crosses a threshold, a bit like if you pour water into a cup and at some point it starts to overflow. Well, when it overflows to that point, we get an emotion. And this is a hormonal reaction, a muscle contraction. And we are then compelled to move. But before we move, we need to go to the brain, the central nervous system, and we need to work out what action we should take. And so we start to go, well, have we experienced this before? And at rapid pace, a bit like ChatGPT, it will start to go, what's the information that I've had? What have parents told me in the past? And what stories do I know? And it will try and find a pattern that fits this picture as quickly as possible. And then it will come to the conclusion and make the action. And the action that it takes will reinforce whether this is an opportunity or a threat. And that's when you get the feeling. But then our central nervous system starts to learn from this, and you then need less information to get the feeling. And the group of feelings will start to build up the experience. And this is really what we're talking about when we're talking about pain. So we're talking about a learnt experience, information that's required to cross a threshold that creates an emotion. And that emotion has a quick checkpoint through the central nervous system, through the brain. But from the information that is whole body, it then decides whether to take the action that is going to reinforce that it's positive or negative. So if you were going to have a tattoo and you had chosen your tattoo parlor very well, it's very clean, it's a lovely place, you know that you're going to experience a little bit of pain when they start to do the tattoo for you. But because you're in control of the environment, you know the goal, you want the tattoo, the pain experience is dulled down. But if somebody, I know, jumps into you while you're in the queue in Target or Sainsbury's and then stabs you with a tattoo gun, it's going to be painful. And the chances are that is going to be more painful. And the action that you take is to try and run away from this person, because you shouldn't get stabbed by a tattoo gun in the supermarket. But what I'm saying is we can get involved in this. And this is the part that is actually quite exciting, because there are two types of pain. And we need to make sure that if our client has got any form of unexplained pain and they've not been to get a diagnosis for fibromyalgia, or they've got a new pain in a hand that they didn't have before, or in their lower back, always get them to go and see a medical doctor, because we don't know. And there are different diseases that would definitely need different forms of treatment. But there are two types of pain. And the first one really is acute pain. And I don't mean like, oh, nice, cute little pussycat. I mean the type of pain when you've just stubbed your toe and it's excruciatingly painful, or you've broken a bone. And then the second type that we're really talking about today is chronic pain. And that's when pain has lasted for longer than 12 weeks. And this is where the central nervous system has started to learn from the information and has started to take actions that reinforce that something is a threat. And the problem with that is it then needs less input to trigger this response in the first place. But John Quintner puts it quite well. Fibromyalgia is not a disorder of the muscles. It's a disorder of pain regulation. And that's really important, because a lot of a lot of the things that I was taught was to stretch out muscles, or correct muscular imbalances, or make sure that you were doing more range of movement through different muscles. But this isn't a disorder of muscles. It's a disorder of pain regulation. And it's really important that we get our head around that difference, because it's going to be so helpful to our clients. But what it does say is that one of the biggest reasons people experience fibromyalgia seems to be central sensitization. So this input of information and this trigger and this response, creating a feeling of threat and creating this experience. So it's like having an alarm system that's on hyperdrive. There are some other reasons that we might get fibromyalgia, things like chemical imbalances, neuroinflammation, small fiber neuropathy, stress axis. But all of that seemed to be really quite low level research. So I thought, well, there isn't a lot of research on that. What's there at the moment seems to be on rodents or small studies. There is more research coming through on genetics and epigenetics. And I think that going forward in the future, this could be an exciting place and perhaps give us, more to go from. But currently at the moment, it's still, again, quite low level research. And gut microbiome. So what I would really say here, again, these are only studies that have been done on rats. We haven't got any robust studies. So the bottom line is, anybody asking to give you the solution by balancing out your chemical hormones or your gut bio, pass. okay, because the research just isn't there at the moment. That might change. The other aspect that seems to be quite strong is the psychological aspect. So if you've been through any previous trauma, PST, that type of thing, that can increase the likelihood of getting fibromyalgia. But again, here we want to be really careful that we're not just categorizing people, saying that it's because you've been through trauma, because it's not as clear as that. But the big one definitely seems to be the alarm system. So it's like having a fire alarm that is going off just because someone has put a piece of bread in the toaster. It's not even burnt, but the alarm system's going off. Or I think of it as if you've been broken into, and so you turn up the sensors on your house alarm. And so now it should just kick off if a human walks onto your property. But now it starts to kick off when a fox walks on your property. But now, worse than still, is AI. And it's learnt that it's kicked off. And so it becomes even more hyper vigilant. And then it starts to kick off when a bird flies down. And it's learning from this. And now it's like, oh, I'm so panicked. I saw a bird come in 3 or 4 times yesterday. So now I'm going to be even more efficient, and I'm going to let you know anytime a spider or an ant crawls near the house. And obviously that is totally unnecessary. So what we want to do is work out how we can calm that central nervous system down, how we can calm that alarm system down. And one of the things that we might want to avoid is treating pain with pain, because what that's going to do is start to feed the pain loop cycle. One of the other things that I was taught through my level 3 and level 4 was myofascial release. And we used to do this all the time. Now, if you enjoy foam rolling, it's absolutely fine if you're not experiencing pain. It will give you a short-term change. Because of the change in the central nervous system, it will take away that perception of range of motion, give you more range, but it's short term. So if you want more long-term performance results, you might want to be looking into the influence and the effects of movement. And if you've got someone who's experiencing chronic pain, then it's a bit like continually punching them in the arm. And that's just going to keep that alarm system super vigilant. Also, when it comes to foam rolling, the whole kind of idea is that we roll on these pressure points, these trigger points. There's about 11 to 18 of them, depending where you look. But the problem is they can't actually agree on where they are. And as they can't actually agree on where they are, they can't be measured and they can't be re-measured. What does seem to bring all of these points together is they all seem to be around nerve endings. So again, if somebody's experiencing pain, you don't want to be poking them in that painful area. If it's something that's part of your running routine and you like it and you enjoy it, then that's not a problem at all. But we want to make sure that on the whole, we're creating a more positive experience. We want to be the trainer that helps when the person goes through an emotion and the body goes, oh, I've got to go to the brain. Is this positive? Is this negative? We want to get involved there, and we want to try and reinsure our clients that they're safe, they're not going to be hurting themselves, and we don't want to put them through more pain. So we want to make them feel like they're watching Cartoon Joe score the final try and winning that medal. Yes. But that's not what I was taught. What I was taught is that we should all move in the same way, a kind of one size fits all cookie cutter approach. And that if we were going to squat, it should definitely look like this textbook squat. And I would be looking for knees in line with toes, shoulders pulled back and down. And I would be definitely making sure that that squat was symmetrical. But unfortunately, this can also have a negative impact on our clients, because if they don't move that way, or if by squatting this way it feels uncomfortable to them, they feel like it's something that they're doing wrong. And actually, when we look at the research, it would appear that there are lots of studies out there to suggest that we can move in as many weird, wonderful ways that we want. And this study I love. It's why aren't we using evidence in lifting? And it shows how 70% of our physiotherapists still will go towards the one size you should squat in this particular way. Yet the evidence is clear that it will not reduce your risks of lower back pain. And in fact, you can move and squat in lots of different ways. So here they tested the stoop, leaning over, and a traditional squat, and none of them caused any increased pain. And now we understand that, you can have pain with damage and without damage. So actually, it's about being skillful in as many different ways as possible and not triggering that alarm system. So if you're someone that prefers to squat knees in line with toes and it feels good to you, that's absolutely fantastic, by the way. But if you squat and it's a little bit quirky and your bottom flips out to the right side, but that feels good to you, then go for it, because that's the important part. We need to find your compelling reason to move and see how we can make that into a game. So really, a game is just how we can put exercises, movements together, how we can put a task or a puzzle together that you can move. And every movement that you do is actually what we call a movement behavior. And this behavior will be a combination of your skill, your brain, the environment that you're in, and the task at hand. And the idea of the game itself is to give you a clear goal of what success looks like, but it gives you the space to create your autonomy on how you make success happen. So when I talked about the squat, rather than it being a one size fits all squat, if it's the squat that allows you to drop in height, fold from the hip, the knee, the foot and ankle, and you get there successfully and it feels good to you, if you were leaning over to the right or leaning over to the left or rotating, does that matter? What we might want to do is play a game where we can then go, well, okay, you can squat whilst you're rotating round to the right. Can you squat and rotate round to the left? Just in case. So that could then start to be the game. So we might add I want you to imagine that you're dropping onto a chair, and as you dropped in height, I want you to throw the ball to me here on that side. And now I want you to throw the ball to me there on that side. So we're using the movements with a rule, but the client knows what success looks like. And within that game of success, you might have targets. So it could have been throwing the ball to the trainer, or it could be getting to the cone that's in front of you, or it could be dropping the bar and then lifting it back up again. But having that clear target. Now, the good thing about this as well is that, say, for example, you said, I want you to get to the red cone in front of you. That's what success looks like, getting to the red cone. Maybe you have to put a flag on the top of that cone. And then your client chooses a forward roll. So the movement behavior they choose to get to the cone and put the flag on it is a forward roll. And that was totally unexpected. They were still successful. They chose a different movement behavior. So now you might be thinking, well, I actually wanted them to step forward with their right leg, keeping their left leg still on that spot, because I wanted to see them lunge. Well, now what we might do is we might change the rules or bring in some different rules, some constraints to that game. So it might be, I want you to start on this mark of X, and I want you to step your right leg forward, keeping your left leg on the X, and then I want you to put the flag onto the cone with your left hand. So now you've put in some more constraints, you've limited the movement behaviors that the client can actually choose. But if they do that lunge and it's comfortable and they've wiggled to the side slightly, it doesn't matter, but as long as they've folded and got there. So you're creating a scenario that they can find success. They know what the clear outcome is. They have targets to help them there. And if they miss the cone and don't get the flag on it, they get the opportunity to change and adapt. And that's my little cog and wheel there. And at this point, if someone gets really confident in moving and they're really sort of showing themselves how good they are, they'll start to be able to move in different ways as well. And that's when we can start to progress and add more challenges. The things that I like to make sure happen in a game, first of all, that it is fun, that fun connects with the client. What's fun to you might not be fun to me. So it's knowing your client, what makes them smile, the things that they like, and then using that within the game scenario, and making sure that they have space to work out their best way of doing it. And so if they have that autonomy, again, it helps them reduce that anxiety and then helps reduce that experience of pain. Whereas if they think they're going to be forced into doing a movement again and again and again that's not comfortable, that's not going to be great. Allowing them to know that it's okay if they do a squat that is perfectly symmetrical if it feels good to them. But if they do a squat that is funky looking and it feels good to them, that's okay too. Making sure that they feel part of the journey in creating that game. So again, this would come in with your interview process, getting to know your client really, really well and letting them come up with some of the ideas that you use within that game. Let them know that you're listening to them, that if they are starting to experience any flare ups at any moment, they can stop, reduce that intensity. Excuse me, my dog's just growling at me. I'll just let her out. And that's really, really important. Then what we get to do is use the skills that we've all learnt through our basic training courses, that ability to be able to see and predict movement. Now here I could have chosen just a squat like this with load, but what I thought I would do is add the same squat with a multitude of different leg positions. So if I removed the weight from this exercise, I can still see that it requires the same biomechanics, the same sequencing as any squat. It still requires the fold from the hip, the knee, the foot, and ankle. But if I was just doing the squat in one position and I continued to work on adding load, then I would be working towards what we call performance. And this is where we need to go if we want muscle adaptation. But if our goal is to create an experience that means somebody wants to come back, that's going to be our key, because we want to make sure that we're not triggering any experience of pain. And to do that, we might want to spend more time in what we call motor skill development. So that's creating a movement that has a much wider umbrella of variables, still going for the same sequencing. So in this case, fold from the hip, fold from the knee, foot and ankle. But in fact, I'm just changing my leg position here, but I could be changing the direction in which I reach my arms, the direction I reach my chest. So I could be changing it every single time. And then it would feel not like one squat, but a whole multitude of different movements. And that can be something that's really useful when we're trying to reintroduce clients to experiences and make sure that they feel confident in them. So I would say that biomechanical matching is about using your ability to see movement. It's not about demanding what we once thought was a perfect squat. It's letting them show us how they are going to achieve their success, dropping down in this case. Then we need to think about matching feelings, and that's matching feelings within the session and also 2 days later. Hina here is obviously loving the feeling of dancing to Snap, I've Got the Power. What I did there was ask her to move to the bench, to the table, and the sofa. What I didn't do is tell her what speed she should travel in. So again, she had the opportunity to self-select the intensity, which would change the feeling. Now, if we are working anaerobically, that's going to feel more intense. And if we're working aerobically, that's going to feel much more like we're in control. And it's not just knowing which energy systems we want to be hitting with those reps sets, but it's also about what emotional connection that has. So for someone that quite likes being out of breath and it reminds them of when they were, I don't know, on the hockey team or the baseball team, that could be a good thing. But if it reminds them of a time that they worked really hard and it led to a pain flare up, that wouldn't be good, because that could potentially be enough to trigger that sensitive alarm system. So we need to be aware of how we match these feelings. We also need to be aware of how they feel 2 days after the session. Now, a lot of trainers are a little bit weird. They like to feel like they can't walk down the stairs. Yes, you've got my glutes, and we might know, yes, that's delayed onset muscle soreness, and it comes through going through new ranges of motion, or from if you can't walk down the stairs, it's because you've hit the muscles around your hips in flexion, adduction, and internal rotation, and you've lifted heavy. And that could be an amazing feeling for someone who loves training, but it could be absolutely catastrophic if that person has experienced sciatica or has had a flare up. And it could be just enough, those DOMs, to make the body set off its alarm system and think, I need to put pain on there to stop you, to warn you. We might be thinking, right, well, rather than eccentrically loading in flexion and internal rotation, I'm going to make sure that we're doing a lot of different movements that involve extension and external rotation in those hips. So we can start to choose those exercises based on the experience that we want our client to have. But the important part is knowing where the feeling matches that client's journey. There's a lot in there, and it's something that we go into a lot more depth over on Motor Skill Application Specialists, but it kind of takes us 12 weeks, 12 modules to go into this in depth. So I'm kind of whizzing through on it. Now, I wanted to show you this game. Is such a simple game. Follow my leader. And what we had to do is Hina had to follow her husband around from his hands. First time around, I allowed him to be the leader, and he's so lovely that he made sure it was very gentle, very calm, and he controlled those movements because he's kind. Hina, on the other hand, is highly competitive. So you could see that as soon as she was in control, she was whipping him around all over the place. And I think you will have noticed she even tried to knee him at the end of that. But what it showed her was how capable she was of adding the intensity, particularly if she felt in control. And again, this comes up numerous times. If people can feel in control, have autonomy over their movement, and self organize, it can help reduce that experience of pain. In this video here, I started off actually giving Damaris the cones, and she had to lunge forward, place the cones down on the floor. So self-selecting how far she went, and then she was adding a load to that movement. And this last part was about getting down into the bottom end of her squat, because she said that she was having trouble with her knee from her injury there, and that's where it was flaring up. So we're creating range through that foot and ankle. But for her, what we also started to do is add a lot of movements where she could get low and pick things up, because she likes to do a lot of gardening, and she's just become a grandma. So now we're starting to introduce lifting and loading in ways that look more functional to her life. So rather than repeating a deadlift in a strict manner for a competition, she doesn't need that. But what she needs is to be able to lift Hector up and put him on her shoulder, or turn him up and pick him up high and make him giggle, give him an aeroplane ride, that type of thing. But it's fascinating seeing how much more confident she is in lifting now that we have the game of pitching this around Hector. To make these games more structured, these are little tips that you can use. I always think about having a target to move to or move away from, or maybe it's a reach. It could be a reach low, or waist height, or high. It could be as simple as, can you get your elbow and reach it low? Can you do it in different angles, that type of thing. And you'll probably see on here, I use the Faster Health and Fitness Hub, and that's got lots of different numbers, lines, dots and triangles, and it's a really lovely way of creating external objects to get to, and that external focus rather than internally getting someone to think about their biomechanics. Obstacles, they're ace, so things like that you can get underneath, like the limbo, or step over your hurdles, round different cones, that type of thing. You could even be a physical hurdle to that person, an obstacle quite like that, where I've said to someone they've got to get to the other side, a bit like British bulldogs, but nicer. And then I'm the actual physical obstacle in the way. Quantitative, so number based. I want you to be able to do X amount of lifting Hector, the Viper grandchild, or I want you to be able to throw this amount of bags in this amount of time. And reactive. So if you throw a bag to someone, they're going to get the pulse of that weight. Their whole body is going to react to this external force. So great for core training. Again, great for distraction. I've got clients that just love me getting a ball out or boxing gloves, that type of thing. So we've done that one. The targets. Here I'm just sat on a chair and I'm putting a little hoop around those targets. So the game is simple. Get up off the chair and put the hoop around the cone. And I'm going in a multitude of different directions. So I'm not repeating the same direction. I'm going for more motor skill learning than so challenging that central nervous system more than challenging my muscles with load. If that's too much, remembering that with Hina on that first time, she really did struggle, you could start all of these in a seated position. Absolutely. Another couple of examples of targets. I've got Damaris going from side to side to the different cones. I'm randomly calling out these cones. What I did notice was every time I called out a cone on the right, she would touch it with her right hand. So if I wanted to get her to use more of her glutes on that right side, I could actually just say, can you use your left hand? So I can change the rules to encourage her to use that movement behavior that I want. But again, she's still in control. She's still self-organizing. In the middle there, we've got Hina, and she's stamping her foot over the weighted bag. So changing towards that ground reaction. Great one for creating range in the foot and ankle. And at the side, just jumping to those cones. So obstacles, that could be in the form of you getting in the way of your client. I do find that if you use yourself within the game, clients really respond well to that. It makes it much more fun, adds a bit of dynamics and competition as well. But it could be as simple as stepping through a ladder, over hurdles, round different cones, or traveling whilst holding a dumbbell or a kettlebell. So you can get to be
set,
quite.
go. Use the other hand. Use the other hand. Box, get set, go.
So simply just putting those hoops on those
Use the other
cones
hand.
in a plank position from her knees, and obviously we get to progress
Use the
that.
other
It can be
hand.
timed.
Box, get set,
The other
go.
one, I was just taking apples out of a bucket.
Use the other hand.
But that was one of my clients' favourite actual exercises to do, the apples.
Box, get set. Box,
Going
get
the wrong
set.
way now. Positive. So reaction. Reaction, we talked about ball throwing, and this was where I discovered that Hina absolutely loves throwing balls. I'm like, right, I'm bringing that in. She likes a ball. She also likes competition. So where I've got my cones, I'm now pitting myself against her. Obviously, when I'm in control, I'm being nice. When she's in control, she is trying to make me move all over the place at pace. But really good to see her moving through those different ranges.
Get set.
So all of these things are about how do we tap in the right experience to our client at that right time. So thinking about what is their compelling reason to move? What do they enjoy? A lot of my clients seem to enjoy the allotment. So I try and think about tasks and games that look like they could be weeding or planting plants. I've even taken in a watering can rather than traditional weights. And it's amazing how they will start to lift more than they would have done if it was a kettlebell. That's not going to be right for everybody. So these are by no means the 5 best exercises for all your clients and the 5 best games. You get to be creative from what you find out about your clients. I don't know why I keep going backwards on this. The other one here is, with Damaris being a grandma, I've noticed that she's now up for lifting more, and she's got a weight that's growing, Hector. So she's getting that change, and with that, it's building her confidence. She doesn't need to work heavily on performance, making sure that she's doing this perfect form for a deadlift competition, because she's not doing a deadlift competition. Her form needs to be the best way of moving for her, the one that doesn't feel uncomfortable. So as long as she lifts and she completes the task that we've created together and she's happy, I'm happy. I will, of course, bring new things into the game all the time, so that if I find, yes, she's got really successful at lifting her Viper Hector to the right, maybe we can start to lift Viper Hector to the left or out in the front and she can pass it to me, those sorts of things. So we think about how we can combine this. So in that little video, we had a few different combinations using a lightsaber, of course, because I found out that Hina was a Star Wars fan. So I'm like, right, well, in that case, we're going to use that to create range of motion through that shoulder, work that core, have a bit of fun. We also had those drills where we were going around different obstacles, getting the hoops over the cones, getting through the ladders. She loved her boxing, and actually just going for that little ball made her accuracy when she actually started to come back onto the pads much more accurate. I love to bring in ball games and competition with Hina. I'm going to try and make sure I go the right direction here. Yes, I did. So every game that we've looked at has been about how do we create an experience for that client that means they know what success looks like, that they have autonomy over their body, they have the opportunity to change and adapt if they're not successful, whether it's touching the cone. But in each and every single movement behavior they've chosen, we can't separate the fascia, the bone, the muscle from the psychology, because every movement that we do is a combination of our skill, our body. It's also a combination of our experiences, stories, things that we've been told. We can't separate that, and the environment that we're in and the task at hand. So we get to be part of that experience. We can get to know the environments our client likes, where they feel more comfortable. For some outside, some in a gym, some like the gym to be noisy, some like it to be really quiet. We get to know these things. All of that is going to be part of that ultimate movement experience.
There we go. You get to what?
I just love her face at the end of
what have I got to do?
her game here.
There
Was
we
to
go.
throw the
You
weighted
get to
bag,
what?
and I don't know if you noticed, but there were 3 different cones for
Oh,
her
no, what have
to
I
get
got
them
to
to,
do?
3 different targets. And if she got to
There
the
we
near
go.
side
You
one,
get to what?
I got to give her a punishment that she had chosen. I think
Oh,
it was
no, what have I got
a
to
jump
do?
squat, something like that. But if she managed to
There
get
we
it further
go.
than
You
the
get to
green one,
what?
the far away one, she got to be able to
Oh
punish
no,
me.
what have I got
And
to
that is
do?
why her face was looking so excited, because
There
she
we go.
nailed
You
it.
get to what?
She was successful, and she wants to get me back for it all.
Oh no, what have
But
I
it's
got
that
to
type of thing
do?
just makes our job incredible. But in order to be able to get the right exercise at the right time, we need to know our clients really, really well. And so we need to get super good at listening. It's almost that we need superhero level listening, not just to the words that they say, but we need to be aware of when their speech changes tempo, when they start to change the way they're breathing, or how they respond spatially towards you, the flicker of the eyebrow or the little quirk of the cheek when you mention a ball or a weighted bag or a competition. You need to be really astute to all of these small different changes. And we also need to be aware of when they're not feeling comfortable, and know that we can adapt at pace and make sure that that client feels listened to. So, my big takeaways are: there isn't a cookie cutter answer, and we are all so, so unique. If we can create a game, a task, a movement puzzle that gives clarity so the client knows what success looks like, that they're part of that journey, they have that autonomy. It gives them back that control, and they can explore moving in many different ways, knowing that if it doesn't feel good, you'll change it. And if they don't feel great the next day, you'll reduce the amount of volume and the amount of load. And gradually, what you'll see is your clients becoming braver and moving not just in one way, but in a multitude of different ways. I hope you've enjoyed today's talk and that it's given you some ideas to go away and think about. And I'm looking forward to some of your questions. If you'd like any of the research studies that I looked at in order to put this together, please make sure that you jot down my email address, and I'm happy to jump on a one-to-one call with you after this event. So I look forward to taking your questions now. Thank you very much.